Other thing I think you should do is, hello. All right, let's tackle these two chapters. So first we'll talk about joints and the motion patterns of joints, a little bit of terminology, and then we'll talk about the axial skeleton, which is, we did the skull already, which is down the spine, the sacrum, and a few other bones. But we'll pretty much focus on the spine, the sacrum, the ribs, and the sternum. Joints are connections between bones. Muscles attach to bones, and when they contract, they pull on them. This is how we can move around in the world. What is the process of self-propulsion called by an animal called? Locomotion. Yes. Joints are the most vulnerable part of the skeletal system. Yeah, the bone, to break a bone takes more than to break a joint. If you bang into a bone, it's not going to break as easy as if you bang into a joint. Look at the knee, look at like soccer players and stuff in knee joint. The most vulnerable part. They often break easier than the bones do. We categorize joints by how much they move and by what kind of material reinforces their connections. What is the prefix we use to describe joints? Arth. Itis is inflammation. So the arth part, that's how I remember it. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, which is fun because if you think about it, if you think arthritis through, once it's not an inflammation, once it's a chronic degenerative process, it's actually arthrosis. But nobody says arthrosis, they always say arthritis. Yeah. So it's itis means inflammation. There's the, well, I mean, and a chronically, degenerative joint is always a little inflamed too, of course, but the chronicity is not described in the word arthritis. So one of the things I find interesting, if you look at the whole muscular locomotor system, we're looking at bones, joints, and then muscles and tendons. And the bones and the joints are the passive elements, they're the sticks. And then the muscles attach to the sticks and move them around. You think of the arm, that's an easy one to think about. And so we have these bony connections, but listen up, guys. Otherwise, I'm going to keep putting that volume up. They enable movement and transmit forces. They're the most vulnerable part. We talked about that. But then we need to categorize them because we got all kind of different joints. We got this joint, or the elbow joint, or the knee joint, but we got the suture, that's a joint too. We got the tooth sticking up in the mouth, that's also a joint. Or even in the hip, we got the hip bone, it's joints. Like if you look at the hip here, the hip is three bones that are fused together. Technically speaking, it's a joint because they are not always been together. They were formed separately and then they fused later on together. That was in utero, but still. And so how much they move? We have some joints that don't move at all. They're immovable. They call them synarthrosis. Syn, S-Y-N, means together. Then we got some that slightly move. We call them amphiarthrosis. Amphi means slightly movement. Amphitheater is a half sort of theater. It's not a round circle. And then, I know you got to come up with thinking of these names because they all come from these old names. And then a movable joint, we call them the diarthrosis. So that's your knee joint. Diarthrosis is your knee joint. That's the one we spend most time with. The rest we just kind of talk about it so we have a framework for, and you can pick it up again when you get to it again. So we think of a joint, we think of that moves freely like a finger. That's not always the type. We have some syn means together. These types often use different type of material to form strong bonds. Choose all the different types of tissue that can create a synarthrosis. Let's go through that. So it's a synarthrosis. A lot of this material is for you guys. It's not on the test. A lot of this material is for you to go back and look if you have a Bio 2 class or some higher anatomy. They talk about it, and it's a little weird. So synarthrosis are all of these. So we have fibers, so there's fibrous joint connections. We have cartilage connections. That for example, in the rib joints, we talk about that a little bit today, or also in the vertebral disc. And then we have bony fusions also. Those are also immovable joints. So they have all these weird names. So don't worry about the names too much, but you want to worry about the building blocks. So syn means together. So those you know are immovable. Osteosis is what material? Osteus, that's bony stuff, right? Osteo is bony stuff. So you think of bony stuff. When you see chondro is cartilage stuff. And when you see, I don't know, desmosis and fiber, I don't know about that. You just memorize that. But again, that's material you memorize in the next class. For me, you just kind of understand it a little bit. So we have what? Cartilage, bony, fiber. That's it, right? The ligament is going to be in the freely movable joint, like you heard of the ACL, right? Knee ligaments. That's ligament stuff, bone to bone. And tendon is muscle to bone. If you don't have that yet in your system, write a little card down. Make sure ligament is bone to bone connection, like a rubber band. Think of a rubber band. Rubber band is very good. You stretch it a little, it goes back. You stretch it too long, it goes long. Ligament, you overstretch your ankle, you twist your ankle, the ligaments out, you stretch, they're not going to go back to the original length. If it's minor, they can, but if it's major, that often tears. And ligaments don't have much blood supply, so guess what? Their healing is very minimal. So if you think of healing capacity of a tissue, you think of blood supply. A cartilage doesn't have blood supply, so if you break a cartilage, it's not good. You have very slow healing, you often have to immobilize things and wait and whatever. Anyway, so that's that. Oh, that goes downward. Some joints are said to move a little. For example, your low back, at the butt level is the pelvis, which has two joints posteriorly that rock back and forth. That's my favorite joint. The booty joints. Right here, back in the back. So these two joints right in here are what I'm talking about. They call them the sacral iliac joints because we're trying to talk about this bone. It's called the sacrum. And this bone we'll do on Wednesdays, the ilium. And so sacral iliac joints. When you look at joint names, they're always describing which bones are connected to one another. So that's actually a good system. So it might be difficult words to hear and see, but you can figure out where they're coming from and what is involved in them. You just have to slow it down enough. So those are very limited. They move much better, transmitting forces. What is the group of joints called? Amphiarthrosis. I made one question. Huh? Question? One question I did wrong. I only had one person tell me I did wrong. I know, thank God. Whoever did was that. I appreciate that. Oh, that was you? Oh. Well, see, the text, I only have phone numbers. I don't know the phone numbers. That's why it's also anonymous, so that's a good thing. You just text me whatever, it's anonymous. Most of what we study in this class, however, are the freely movable joints. Let's get to the freely movable joints. Consider your knee joint as you walk. It constantly bends and straightens back out or every time you take a step. The two bones that meet will need protection so we don't rub bone against another bone. That's like a brick on a brick. That's not good. That's grinding it down. What is the protective material called? Joint or articular cartilage. Let's look at that. Oh, look, see, here's the hip joints, the pelvic joints in here. And actually, the reason why I put this picture up, anybody know what that muscle is? Probably not yet, right? There's a piriformis. Anybody heard of sciatica? Low back bad stuff? The sciatic nerve is a nerve that comes out from up here in the back, and it goes down and it pierces through the piriformis. Like goes straight right here, right through the bone. And if that muscle is tight and it squeezes that nerve, they call that, sciatica because of Piriformis Syndrome, they call that. And when you look at the spine goes up like that, straight up. You don't want it bent, you want it straight. You want the head over the hip, not over here. That would be. Friday, the first patient walked in like that. Couldn't move straight. The second patient was better, but like that. And the third patient walked in like that. I was like, it was just acute after acute. They all walked back out better, but You can't just, it's really hard to just straighten them back out if it's spasming like that. But the thing is that's interesting about this muscle, so the sacrum comes down and then has this joint that is to the hip side, and that's the joint we're talking about. It moves a little bit. But this muscle here is attached to the side, to the hip here on the side, and it goes inward like that. And what it does when it contracts, it moves, when the spine moves a little bit over, it contracts to the other side, it balances the spine out that way. So it's very, very interesting muscle. So we'll get to all those kind of muscles. Anyway, next, I get ahead of myself. Let's do the joint cartilage. That was the thing. So the joint cartilage at the end of bones, the type of cartilage called hyaline cartilage. That's one of the three types. You have hyaline, elastic, and what was the other one? Uh-oh. Anyway, the one that's the meniscus. We'll get back to the cartilage part, so I shouldn't go that detailed. But the cartilage is one, and the thing about the joint cartilage is it's avascular. When you jump high and you fall, you come down a lot and you break a little bit, it's very difficult to heal it. So you want to be aware of that, and the avascularity. The other thing that's interesting is when something doesn't have blood bringing nutrients in by itself, but you have to get nutrients some other way. In this cartilage, fiber cartilage was the other one. In this cartilage, you have these lacunae and these cells sitting in the lacunae. They live. They need nutrients to live, to make more cartilage. And you get the nutrients not by the vascularity, but you get it by loading and unloading. That's walking, right? So if your best bet, if you have some injuries, to regenerate it, unless it keeps making it worse, is to have some physical activity. And do that, what we call an imbibition, the squeezing and unsqueezing, that creates the nutrient squeezing out from the cartilage and sucking it back in. And so you have that. That's an important piece about that. And they say cartilage problems regenerate insignificantly because, again, avascular. That's what they say. So if you've got a bad knee, you've got a... Well, the thing is this. You've got a bad knee, like Mom, she was here. She has a bad knee. It's bad. She's limping and it hurts. And she has a frayed meniscus. So the meniscus is this, it's not here, but the meniscus is a piece in here that glides the motion and helps the motion. And that's one piece that gets injured a lot. And as we get older, it sort of frazzles at the end, and then it gets stuck and that hurts. She got some arthritis stuff, and she got a little bit of the joint capsule squeezing back. They call it a Baker's cyst. This is a very common thing too. The treatment, you can go, oh, what is it? And you find a diagnosis, and then what am I supposed to do about it? What helped the most is strengthening, building the muscle up, having a good physical therapist that guides her in the strengthening and educating what is it about. And then the meniscus, she might have to go in and get it a little bit removed and taken out. But then her knee is back to being 65, and she's 77. That old lady, she's 77. Well, actually, my mom is not old. She's never old. But so that's what I wanted to say about that. Cartilage, important stuff. So the next thing is probably, where's the next thing? There we go, nourishing. We have nourishing liquid inside the joints that help lubricate them. There's what structure keeps that fluid in and prevents the bone from separating during use? That joint capsule. And actually, the joint capsule is around the joint. Is around the joint here. And a Baker's cyst is when part of that fluid pouch squeezes through the joint capsule. So that's a Baker's cyst. So they don't just take that stuff out, because then you take out fluid. You don't necessarily want to do that. All right, the joint capsule. All the joints require different types of movement. A shoulder, for example, needs to move freely, as freely as possible in all directions. This quality compromises its stability, making it more vulnerable for injury. Does that make sense? If you think of a hip, that's some solid shit. You can jump on that. If you jump on a shoulder, that's not going to work. But you can do this with a shoulder. So if you think of its strength and its flexibility at the same time, it's like an incredibly designed crane. It's very, very strong. It's just vulnerable because it's so flexible. So we have to be a little careful about that. So like, for example, a lot of end range motion with weight on it, like swimming, crawl swimming, the freestyle swimming. like those things can wear out the shoulder over time. And so, you know, if we're always pushing ourselves and we get into our 50s, that's when things get a little bit. So we just want to think about it. So we just want to, what we want to do most is we don't want to ignore injuries when they happen. We want to figure out what's wrong functionally and try to make it as normal as possible. And then the results of an injury are much, much less problematic than if we just mask the symptomatology.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So people that play sports, they wear their bodies down faster than we do? Because like I was watching this girl doing gymnastics and she was like landing it.
Oh yeah. Oh, that level of sport? Oh, wow, that's crazy. I mean, you got to be really into it, or you definitely hate your parents later. I mean, I have some girls who had gymnastics. They were so resentful of their parents.
Do you think that people that play sports, their bodies can be healthy, their cardio, everything can be healthy, but their bones are just done for?
Well, when somebody does excessive sport, you know, sport is good. I'm nothing against sport, but I remember I had this guy, and he was in his early 40s. He was a priest, and a minister, not a priest, and and he was doing off-road mountain biking things, you know, fast, cool stuff. But you fall down, you're gonna hurt yourself. And then he was doing trail running, and I had to ask him, "Are you doing that much sport because it's really for health, or are you trying to keep your brain calm?" Because if you think of nerves in the head, neurons, they can only talk to other nerves, to muscles, and to glands. So you get anxiety thoughts. Some people start sweating. Some people start, you know, going crazy in the head. And some people need to do a lot of sports to calm the head down. That's also a reason to do sports. And if you look at health, then you've got to look at all those things, because if you do more than an hour cardio a day, it's not necessary. And so that's one side. And then, of course, the extreme sports, like, you know, you go pro. When you know these things and then you watch a football game, you're like, how do these people even walk? You know, and then, you know, actually the next couple of days after a football game, they don't walk. And I know that from first-hand people telling me that. And so gymnastics is they're very pain. A lot of people have a lot of pain later on. Stuff like that, yeah. It's very difficult. I read an article about Nadal, the tennis guy, and Federer, and I don't, the amount, apparently they're all eating pain pills after a certain age, you know, so that's excessive, I think. It's fun to watch. I like to watch it. Simone Biles, she can fly through the air. All right, so the hip joint, shoulder joint. Hip joint is more stable because it's more concerned with standing down and bringing the weight down to the ground from the trunk and moving us around. A finger joint, for example, is basically, so we have, the shoulder joint is very flexible. The hip joint's a little less flexible. But then we have joints like a finger joint. The finger joint just needs to do that. Just needs to go bend and straighten back out. Choose all the different joint types that we have. So a joint type is the joint is shaped by what motion it needs to do. And so we have, what kind of joints do we have? We have hinge joints, right? Do we have hinge joints? Let's just go through it real quick. These are the ball and socket joint. The humerus is a good example. You can move all directions. You got a ball and a socket. Then you got a pivot joint, and that's basically a bone protrudes up into a sleeve or a ring composed of bone or ligaments, and then the movement is just around an axis. So you got on the arm. Let me get an arm. Uh-oh. Not good. Hold on. So when we look at the arm, right here, the forearm, you got the bone that's going by the thumb side on here. That is round on top. And when you have a palm go down, it rolls over the other bone. So that's a rolling sort of joint. They call that a pivot joint. And that's the radius, and that's the ulnar. So they call this one, example, the radio-ulnar joint. Here. And then we got a saddle joint, and that's two concave surfaces that create two main motions. The best one you can see is the thumb stuff here. So you can go this way and you go this way. It's harder to go around. You can do it, but it's harder. The main motions are this and this. And you can see how the bones are shaped that way. And then we got the hinge joint, and that's another interesting joint in the elbow. That's up here. So if you have the other arm bone, the elbow, the tip of the elbow, that's a forearm bone. The tip of the elbow is right here, and that's the forearm bone going to the pinky. And that bone grabs, like hooks into the other bone, and makes like it's like a door. It's almost like a hinge joint in a door, and it only goes this way. You can only go these directions. You don't go this way. The elbow goes this way and this way. Don't go too far other ways. The outside motion is more up here. And then we got a plane joint, and plane joints are two surfaces that just match and they move like that in a one plane. They only move in one. The example is you got in the spine. Like these joints in the back of the necks, they are like two parallel surfaces coming together, and they just move a little bit and glide. And then the condylar, oval-shaped head socket allows movement in two main directions. Yeah, that's kind of similar to ball and socket, it's just more shallow. So it's not as deep. The ball and socket is not as deep. It's more shallow. Good. I'm really proud of this picture. Because I wrote all these little things in, and it came like that. All right. So here on the answer is basically all except the rolling. Saddle, hinge, and plane. And of course, since all these different joints do different motions, we will give the movements their own names. Bending an elbow is called flexion. What is it called when we straighten it out? Good. And that was a question I had wrong. So if you put, I fixed it. Thank you, Ebony. I'm doing this is a second time around. So a couple of questions are still wrong. So if you find one and you go like, this just doesn't sound right, you text me. You can go back and fix it. And what happens is when I go in and fix this, I give everybody a point, even if you have it wrong. I can make that choice in the back because you already taken it, and then I go fix it. All right, but it is extension. So flexion, bending the elbow, extension, bringing it out. That's main ones there. The next body motion we describe is found in the extremities. We move a hand away from the body. We call it abduction. What do we call it when we bring it to the body? Adduction. So I remember that they're so close. There's one letter difference. I remember adding a limb to the body is adduction, like a mathematical addition, versus taking it away, and that's just the older one. That's how I remember it. Abduction, adduction. And an interesting movement is turning the palm up and down. What are those movements called respectively? Pronation, supination. You go palm up as you hold a bowl of soup in your hand. That's supination. So I remember that. And lastly, we look at the ankle. The main motions, toes up and down. It also bends inward and outward a little bit. That's how you twist an ankle. Because these outer ligaments are not as strong. So you roll the ankle to the outward. To the inward. We often twist our ankles when the sole of the foot points inward. What is that called? Inversion. So you get an inversion sprain when you roll the ankle. Eversion would be this way. Sometimes that happens, but the ligaments here are very strong, so they usually don't tear. Brings us to the bone that make up the trunk. Oh, look at that. Now we're going to the next section. Let's see if we missed anything. I think we got that pretty well, right? Do you have any questions to these motions? We didn't talk circumductions. That's just making a round thing. That never comes up. I don't think. It hurts in circumduction. It's like that. And then rotation. We can rotation the foot out or the palm out rotation up here. You call that external or lateral. And then going in is medial or internal rotation. And that's self-explanatory. Pronation, supination, and the foot goes up and down. Up means dorsiflexion. Down means plantar flexion. I remember it, you plant the plants in the ground. So you push down. You plant your feet that way. So it's not extension and flexion. It's just dorsiflexion and plantar flexion. They use those terms for the ankle specifically. Nothing else. And then here's the eversion, inversion. Good. Oh, and opposition. This is the reason why we are humans, why we develop so much. one of the main reasons. Which other animal can do that? I'm not sure. Possibly. Yeah, but this is pretty much an ape-thick situation for sure. The dogs can't do that. How is he going to hold a hammer? That's really hard. And so that opposition, that motion, these muscles here, they are saying that those are very important for our evolutionary development because we could manipulate tools with that. You have one thing coming together. So that's coolio.